Is there a life after enlightenment? Hello, this is Chris speaking, Shores of Infinity, with a video about what happens after enlightenment, when enlightenment, full enlightenment has happened. Now, this is a very good question, and Sri Aurobindo gives an answer to it in the 3rd chapter of the 2nd book of the Life Divine, called The Eternal and the Individual. So what does happen after enlightenment? There's a big dispute between enlightened gurus. If there's anything left, is there any self left, or is there no self left after enlightenment? Is enlightenment the total dissolution of any kind of self? And then, as I have also claimed already in many videos, is there no self left to experience enlightenment? Is it a dissolution into the vastness of the Absolute, the Infinite? Is then any individuality gone? And Sri Aurobindo is one of the few gurus who said it is not gone. That is one of his main messages. One of the main messages of Sri Aurobindo's and the Mother's Integral Yoga is that after enlightenment, it continues. The path continues. It goes ever on, and there's always new stuff to explore, because the infinite is infinite, and we are part of the infinite, and we have access to the infinite. And this access is what he calls the soul, or the psychic being, or the psychic entity, or the Purusa. Now, the Purusa is not only the Absolute, it is also, we are part of the Purusa, and the Purusa also dwells within us. The confusion, Sri Aurobindo explains, is that we confuse ego and self, which for him are not the same thing. We usually think that self and ego are the same, is the same. For him, it isn't. For him, ego is something very superficial, and below that or beyond that, there is a self with capital S, a big self. But it is not 100% individual. He says that there's some semblance of individuality remains after full enlightenment. But we cannot compare it to the ego. It's not something that feels separate from everything. That's the self that the ego is, defines itself by feeling separate from everything else and comparing itself with others and other things. That is not how the self with capital S works. The capital S self is in contact with everything because it's part of the Purusa, it's part of the divine, of the infinite, of the absolute. Also, he explains yet another time that this has nothing to do with normal logic. Normal logic cannot comprehend this. It's either this or that. But it's something else. It's a third, a synthetic solution, that at the same time individuality gets erased and some new form of individuality, a tongue twister, a new form of individuality is then revealed, to you, which is the link between the individual and the eternal, which is the psychic being or the soul. The reason why so many gurus don't agree with this or don't talk about this is because they have never been in contact with a psychic being, or not for long. This is some very advanced stuff. You need at least full enlightenment, which is, for example, on scales, is third tier spiral dynamics, is 700 plus Hawkins scale, is location 10 plus on the Jeffrey Martin scale. And then the connection with the psychic being may happen. There's no guarantee, but it may happen. But if it happens, there is still kind of the sense of being an individual, but it doesn't matter anymore because you feel connected to everything. There is the experience of oneness. It's the I am that of Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. I am that. Then there is no question anymore. Am I this or that? Am I an individual or am I everything? Am I a human being or am I the divine? This doesn't compute anymore. It doesn't make any sense anymore because this is our dual logic, and this is beyond the dual logic. For the dual logic, it's the only two possibilities. Either I am an individual or I am one and everything, or gone. But this is not the case, Sri Aurobindo says. The only reason for the dispute here, for the confusion, is that we cannot solve this with our normal logic. Our logic, our mind, our ego cannot understand it because it's beyond that. It's an experience. And it is possible because the Purusa, the infinite consciousness, is not determined or limited by its individualization. It chooses to experience the world also as individuals, but it is not limited or determined by this. It's just one way to experience this. And there are many other ways too. So until full enlightenment and contact with a psychic being, you have this way to experience yourself as a separate entity, and afterwards you have a different experience which also feels individual but in a completely different way, and it's not a separate individual anymore. It's not isolated, and memory comes back. Yeah. Another thing Sri Aurobindo and the Mother are very famous for is that they say nothing can be learned. It's about remembering or re-remembering or relearning. It's not, you can never learn anything new because that part of you that is the real thing, the psychic entity, it knows everything already. So it's about remembering. He writes, for in fact the knowledge, with a capital K, the knowledge is there concealed in the ignorance itself. It has rather to be unveiled than acquired. It reveals itself rather than is learned by an inward and upward self-unfolding. That's a very cool way to put it, an inward and upward self-unfolding. Yeah? It's an unveiling and revealing, not a learning. This is very similar to early Buddhism, that we have a dual nature. Part of it is already Buddha and part of us is not. Part of us is more animal. Or part of us is ignorant and part of us is already enlightened. And the search for Buddhist enlightenment is to find that part in us that is already enlightened, to connect to it. And to remember that we are already enlightened, that we already know. And lastly, the third message of this chapter is that it is part of the plan that this inward and upward self-unfolding takes place. This is not an accident, and this is why Maya allows it. Maya allows this to happen because it's part of the plan that it happens. He writes, the possibility of the divine's unfolding in the individual is the secret of the enigma. his presence there and his intention of self-unfolding the key to the world of knowledge ignorance. And we're living in a world of knowledge ignorance. Simultaneously, those two things happen. And the secret to this paradox is the intention of self-unfolding is inbuilt, meaning the intention of what we call enlightenment is inbuilt. So the Purusa, the infinite, has no interest in self-annihilation. It has an interest in lila, in the cosmic game, in experiencing as many types of experience as possible, as many forms and types of consciousness as possible, from total inconscience to absolute conscience. It's not an error, he writes, the existence of the individual is not an error in some self of the absolute, which that self afterwards discovers. We are caught in the ignorance, but not the absolute, not the Purusa is not caught in ignorance. It's playing ignorance, but not as an error. It's part of the game. It's willed to be like that. He even writes that this we might see as ruthless and disastrous, to play with our ignorance. But that's only from our point of view, of course, from our limited point of view, while the divine has an unlimited point of view. There is a justification of our individual limited existence, which is that this unfolding, what the infinite probably calls self-unfolding, and what we call the spiritual journey, the journey of enlightenment, is the divine delight, is the ananda, is the aim of the whole exercise of the cosmic play of the lila. So our unconsciousness, our ignorance, and our life within the ignorance is not some subordinate sideshow that's happening. It's neither unimportant nor super important. It's part of the whole game. It's part of the reason of the whole game. It's part of a plan. Yes, there is a plan. It's part of a plan of cosmic evolution, involution and evolution. And that is why there will still be some sense of individuality after enlightenment. It's not a drop dissolving into the ocean. Or not only. After enlightenment, nothing changes and everything changes. It's different. It's still similar, but it's different also. The experience is a different one. But it has still some individual aspects. Otherwise, it would defeat the whole purpose of the self-unfolding. So don't forget to like and subscribe so that others can find this channel as well. Do something for the algorithm, please. Thank you for liking and subscribing, for joining me as a Patreon. Thank you to all my Patreons, and see you soon.